So today is strictly a D-Log M day. I'm going to try applying some tricks when coloring this. Sometimes when I watch videos on these color space transformations, you get a lot of good guidance, but sometimes I think they're done by guys who are pros, who maybe are used to using footage filmed on better cameras than, say, like this Pocket 3. So their color transformations work a little better than maybe the kind of color transformations I might need to use, because my filming is nothing fancy. I work on a Pocket 3, an iPhone, or a GoPro. I mean, those are my three choices. I think what I need to do is commit to a color profile and just work with it instead of trying to do all these different, whoa, this is in normal, this is it in HLG, this is it in D-Log M. I don't know. I think the next video I put out, if I ever get around to doing it, will be called Color Grade Me, as in like grade my what I've picked up. Because I've had some bad coloring moments. It is not easy. Especially when you get teased all the time about how you don't have any, you can't tell the difference between colors. I once wore a black suit to a party in college, and I walked in, and the person I was taking, she says, "You don't match." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Black pants and black jacket, it matches." "No, there's blue based black and green based black." I'm like, "That's insane. There's not a thing." Of course it's a thing. But yeah. So trying to learn how to do color grading when you don't have a really good eye for color makes things interesting, because like if I think it looks good, maybe it'll look like garbage to a normal person. I don't know. But that's maybe why the video should be called Color Grade Me, because maybe y'all give me a D or a C minus, who knows. I am in DaVinci Resolve. This is the color tab, and I have loaded up the video that I had recorded yesterday that I was just using to kind of capture some D-Log M footage. Strictly an exercise in, how I can tweak the colors to make it look more interesting. I mean, it's a pretty boring video to begin with, just me walking up and down my street, but just see what I can do with the colors to make them pop out a little bit more than it was before. There's a few things that I go through when I try to color grade. The first thing I try and do is I do this thing called a color transformation. I try and take the data that my camera, a Pocket 3, captured and transport it into this editing environment and use a color space that is pretty large, pretty consistent, and uses a lot of color, makes a lot of color available. And then when I'm done with it, I transform it back out to a style that is easily recognizable and viewable on like TVs and monitors and phones. So I do that through a series of serial nodes. Now, I am by no means an expert in all this. I've learned the words and I've learned the basic concepts, but by no stretch of imagination am I going to ever be employed doing this. But I can have fun learning how it works. So series nodes basically allow you to cumulatively make changes to your video as you go through the editing process. But again, the first thing you need to do is do a color transformation. So what I do is, the first thing is I go to this color space transform effect. You can find it under the effects tab here underneath Resolve FX Color. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it and drop it onto this first node here.
Now when I do that, I open up a few choices, and most of these choices I don't know what they mean, and I don't ever touch them. I just leave them as they are. What I do know is what this input color space and input gamma mean, and what output color space and output gamma mean. In this first node where you're feeding your initial capture into the editor, you need to know what your color space is for your camera. So I have a Pocket 3. Now the thing with Pocket 3s and D-Log M footage is that DJI has not really released to the public the math that goes on behind the scenes with their D-Log M footage. So you just kind of have to, I'd say guess is probably a bad word, but through research and seeing other people's footage and comments, you kind of get to the point where you kind of make an educated guess as to what the best options are. So this input color space is just a representation of all the colors that are available through my camera. What colors can my camera capture? So now, for this particular camera in this setting, that choice is DJI D Gamut. That's the name of the color space. That's the name of the space given to all the colors available to this camera. Input gamma, I have strictly done this through research. I'm not 100% sure. I know that it has something to do with luminance, but I know that the value that I want for input gamma with this D-Log M is this Rec 2100 HLG scene. Now you can see as I make adjustments, the image changes a little bit. Now the reason why this D-Log M footage looks so drab and dreary and flat is because when you capture using the D-Log M color profile, it gathers up all the color data and all the photograph data, but the camera doesn't do anything with it. DJI doesn't, use the normal mode where it colors it for you. It leaves it all out in very raw form for you to edit yourself. All right, great. So now when I bring this into an editor, I want my color space to be something that's allows for a lot of color, allows for a lot of editing potential, things like that. And I have come to learn that the best choices for output color space is something called DaVinci Wide Gamut, and output gamma is something called DaVinci Intermediate. Now, when you look at these drop downs, you'll see that there are all tons of different choices. Now, someone who's smarter than me might change their color spaces to something else. But for me, kind of being rough and new with this, I just go with this kind of generally accepted standard. Now, this allows my original footage to move into a space where I can start coloring using this output color space setup, or this DaVinci Wide Gamut setup. Now, the one thing that's interesting about that is that you can't really output it, because what you see on the screen in this color space might not look really good on a monitor or a TV or a phone. So you have to output your changes to a format that is nice and compatible with those mediums. So I make another serial node, and what I do in this serial node is I do another color space transform, and now I want to transfer it out of the editing mode that I was in with the DaVinci Wide Gamut and the DaVinci Intermediate, and I want to output the color space to something that's easily compatible with all sorts of different mediums. The output gamma, again, this is just through research and videos, and it seems to be the best choice is this gamma 2.4. And you can see when I make that change how it's colorful and it's made a lot of changes. Oops, let me turn this back on and start over. 3, 2, 1. So when I add the color space transformation on the outbound end, you can see that it kind of brightens it up a little bit. So just the mere fact of converting it from D-Log M to Rec 709 gives me kind of a workable image, but maybe we can make it a little sharper. Now, I know that I have seen color node trees that are crazy, but I am not to that level yet. I am still bare bones noob beginner. So what I do is I set up a series of serial nodes where I can do very basic changes and then call it a day. I'll add one more. So basically, when these serial nodes work is every single time you make a change to your image through one of these serial nodes, it saves it and passes that information on to the next node. So when I go into the next node, it will have accumulation of all the previous nodes, and now I can apply new changes to that node. So it accumulates as it goes down the serial line. There are other types of nodes like parallel nodes, and those are different. I'm not even going to bother saying anything more about those other than the word of parallel. But what I like to do is I like to label my nodes to keep track of them because I can't remember this crap. So this first node is I'm just going to say DJI to DaVinci wide gamut. And my next node is I'm going to call it balance. So all I'm going to do in this node is change the balance, make it kind of more of an overall effect change. The next thing I'm going to do is contrast. I'm going to try and make the lights and darks of the image look better. The next node what I'm going to do is I'm going to do saturation changes. Maybe make the colors look a little richer. Not too rich, but make them stand out a little bit more. And this last node, I'll just save that for something else later. Now, just because I have these things doesn't mean that I have to do balance work or I have to do saturation work. I can just skip them altogether because as long as I don't make any changes, the data from the previous node just passes through and does nothing. So right now what we see, even though I've added 4 serial nodes, I still see the original image from when I just had the first node and the last node set up. I'm going to label this one too. DWG 2709. That's just a way for me to keep track of what's going on. Okay, so now let's work on balance. There's all sorts of ways you can do balance, but again, I know very small amounts of information about this. So what I do know is these primary color wheels allow you to make subtle changes to the dark parts of the screen, the light parts of the screen, and the middle in between parts. Or you can do the offset, which kind of manages them all in one wheel. And I like that because I don't have to worry about these other things just yet. So I'm going to take this offset wheel. I'm going to change it just a little bit, see what happens, and see if I can tweak this to make it a little more interesting. Like when I dial it way down, it gets darker. When I dial it way up, it gets brighter. I don't think I really like that, but I do like maybe making it a little brighter, kind of like a little more even. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is contrast. Now, why don't I just do balance and contrast at the same time? Well, because what if I do something with the contrast that I don't like, and how do I change the contrast back to what it was originally if I don't have the number memorized and without affecting the balance changes I made? So what I do is when I create a serial node, I just do one change in that serial node so I can turn it off and turn it on and see what effect it has on the image and whatnot. So the next thing I want to do is the contrast. Kind of want to balance the lights and the darks. Now there's a contrast setting right here, and I'm going to mess around with it. So I'm going to dial it way up, way down. So I'm making all the, where am I? Dial it way down. Now it's like super bright. That doesn't look very good. I'm going to dial it way up. Now it looks super dark and it looks bad. So let's go back to what it was originally. This little backwards arrow resets everything. So let's just change the contrast a little bit. That's too much. Maybe maybe about here. Maybe about there. Okay. Now I'll move on to saturation. Here's the saturation dial right here, or the space right here. So let's mess around with it and see what happens. So I dial it way down, like all the color goes away. If I dial it way up, it gets like obnoxiously saturated. So let's take it back to the beginning. Make these colors like here stand out a little bit more. Maybe the grass, make it look a little greener by dialing up the saturation. I mean, that looks pretty decent right there. I kind of like that. Okay, so now you can, with these nodes, you can turn them on and off. All you gotta do is click on this little number here in the corner. So if I want to see what happens to my picture if I just say turn off the contrast change I made, you can see that it gets a little brighter. What if I turned off the saturation? It's hard to see, but the street gets a little darker. What about this balance? The balance, there hasn't been a whole lot of change to this that you see in this particular picture. Now, what's interesting about this is that you can see how your changes in one section of the video might accidentally affect changes in other parts of the video. Now, I haven't chopped up this video to make my little colored changes in every single clip. I just have one giant clip. So let's find something that might have been affected by the. So that looks a little bright, right? Little rich right there, maybe too rich. What about me? Okay, here's me. And if you look at this shirt is probably too pink. There's probably too much red in that. That tells me that the saturation might be a little too high. So let me dial it back a little bit, see what happens with it. Let's see here. Okay, so it's still red, but not obnoxiously red. So that's cool. Let's see, the contrast. Does the contrast do anything too bad to this? Not really. Balance. Balance looks pretty decent. Let me try just changing it a little bit. That's probably okay. Okay, so this up here isn't as bright as it was before, which is good. This looks kind of a little more what it looks like in real life. Now, this last thing that a lot of times I do with final touches, that I'll mess around with this graph here. Now I'll go to this last node, and you can kind of see what happens when you mess up with something. So let's just say I want to change the graph a little bit, and I go like that. Well, it just blows out the picture. Well, that stinks. How am I going to fix that? Well, a couple ways. One, I can just turn the node off, and it goes away. If I turn the node back on, I could also reset the node, the change that I did here, and this reset all. It resets any change I made to this curve. All right, it's back too. There's another way. You can actually right-click on the node and just say reset node grade, and that resets it to what it was before you started. Now, if you notice, whenever I reset the node grade, it doesn't change my contrast changes. It doesn't change my saturation. All these numbers accumulate into this node here. So I can do anything I want in this node, and it doesn't affect what I've already done to the picture. So let's go and let's mess around with this graph just a little bit, see what happens. All right, so you brightens it up, darkens it a little bit. Fine. This is probably a tough video to color grade, to be honest with you, because there's not a whole lot of variance in the colors as it is. It's still kind of winter time, so it's still kind of dreary. Probably if I went to a park or a garden or something where you have more colors, it would be more interesting. But it's just kind of an exercise in learning how this works. So I guess I think I'm going to name this video Color Grade Me, because I need some input and feedback on how things are looking. None of my friends do this. The only people that do this are you in the audience, because you're looking for this kind of thing and you want to see how people work and what their thought process is with this. So you're the people who have to give me feedback. Now maybe this is garbage and maybe I should just not quit my day job. Or maybe I'm on the right path. Any of that kind of feedback is helpful. So I guess I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully this provided some value, kind of give you a perspective of what a total hack who just barely scratching the surface can do with this sort of stuff. Not any of those guys with the fancy desks and the 3 monitors and the special trackballs and all the hotkeys. I got a keyboard and a mouse. That's all I have. And so I guess on that, thanks for watching. I hope to experiment with this more in the future, and who knows, maybe by the end of the summer I can quit my day job. Doubtful, but we'll see. All right, thanks for watching. Take it easy.